How you going? We're back for another live video for you guys, and today we want to talk about how childhood patterns affect our relationships. So
Our adult relationships.
our adult relationships, yes. So this topic is something that's near and dear to our hearts because it was really understanding some of this stuff that we're going to talk about today that saved our relationship when we hit rock bottom. So just to start, for people that don't know us, haven't really got to know us yet or our story, we're going to start by sharing, I'm going to start by sharing a story that happened to me as a child, and I almost replicated it in our marriage unconsciously. I didn't know what I was doing. So I come from a divorced family. My parents divorced when I was 5 or 6, somewhere there, and I found my childhood very stressful. I don't remember a lot of it, and I just always never really felt that comfortable in life in general. But then fast forward to when Maria and I met, we had a lovely time together, things were going well, and we were together for 10 years, roughly, before things really started going downhill. And it wasn't until the kids came along and we were married, had kids, that things really started to fall apart. And I didn't understand why. I had some very negative behaviours towards Maria and the kids, and pushing them away almost. Well, I was pushing them away, and I didn't really understand why. I wasn't happy. Maria definitely wasn't happy, and we got to the point where we separated and faced divorce. Now, why did that happen? We want to break that down for you guys a little bit today as to what really happens in our relationships that affects our relationships now. So it's really important to understand that our childhood and what we see and what we're modelled in our childhood does affect us today. We can be blind and pretend it doesn't, and I did that for a long time too. Said to Maria, from a divorced family, people who complain about divorced families that they've got problems, blah, blah, blah.
It never impacted me.
It didn't impact me. I had a great childhood. Whatever the story I was telling was a defence, because really I didn't want to look inside myself and see what was going on.
You didn't want anybody else to either.
No, it was too painful. So what really happens is that our mind is open when we're children. We're like a blank slate. We have our temperament, we have certain character traits. However, our mind is open to the world, and what we see gets programmed into us. So my parents divorced at 5 or 6. I'm sure their relationship was stressful before that, because relationships don't just fall apart overnight. So my whole childhood I would have seen and felt, more importantly, dysfunctional relating, and that's how I was programmed to see it and respond and react to that dysfunctional relating.
So the programming that Justin's talking about is because there's a range of reasons why. It's partly because of the brainwaves of the developing child, and it's also literally just where the child is in their developmental stage. So it's the environment they're growing up with, and like Justin said, the temperament or character of the child. And that programming can be called conditioning, or you might hear the word blueprint. I'm just showing you some other words so that you understand what we're talking about. So this is how we're programmed, or our subconscious mind is programmed. Everything that comes into the child's experience is written into that program.
Yeah. So that program, which is us, we think it's us, it's the behaviours, the emotions, the thoughts, the beliefs, all of that has been programmed into us from our past. And like Maria says, a lot of that's subconscious, we don't see it. That all comes largely from modelling from our parents in the early stages of our life. Any traumas we've received, unfortunately people have received, all sorts of big T's and little T's. So for me, I suffered trauma. I was never, beaten or bashed or sexually abused or any of that. But for me, the fundamental thing is how we process whatever we experience internally, and that is a very personal thing. But attachment styles play into that, so we all have different ways of attaching. Some of you may be aware there's 3 main ones. There's anxious, avoidant and secure. And based on our attachment tendency, that also impacts how we relate to others and how close we want to be to others and how safe we feel in connection with others. And that, coupled with what we see from our modelling and things like that, compound those patterns. And there's lots of other social factors that play into that as well.
And I'll just touch on the fact, one little other fact, that we're literally talking, the child experiences love in a particular way, and we call that our model of love. And every single one of us, that experience in our home generally by our primary caregivers, whether that's your parents, it can include your siblings, other trusted adults, but that forms our model of love. And that directly relates to our adult, how we choose our partners, how we relate to our partners, what we think's normal, and it directly relates to what we think love looks like, whether it's dysfunctional or functional. So this includes the positives and the negatives.
Yeah. There was something on the tip of my tongue there. Never mind, we'll keep moving. So it's really important to understand that, because the basis of all of that forms how we trust, how we communicate, and how emotionally safe we feel. And that's the basis of a healthy relationship. So for us, using me as an example in our relationship, is that I saw dysfunctional relating. I didn't feel safe. I saw my parents separate, divorce. I don't even really remember what happened, but apparently I didn't see my dad for about 9 months after that, because he had his own mental health issues that the breakup of their marriage catalysed him into needing time out. All of that played into me, so I was fearful of love. Love for me felt very scary. I didn't have language for that as a child. I didn't have language for that most of the way through my life.
Yeah, I get
got emotion coming up now because it's sad when this happens. The child doesn't understand what's happening. But all of that patterning, all of that programming, all of that feeling was programmed into me, so that when I felt intimacy and love with Maria, which is what we want, like that's the holy grail of life, is feeling love and connection with another person. That was wired to me with fear. So when I felt that, the fear of losing that would then dictate and govern my behaviour. And this is why it's so confusing. It's so unconscious that we don't see it. I was pushing Maria and the kids away because I loved them so much, because I was scared of losing them. It sounds crazy, but this is what happens. We unconsciously react out of fear and sabotage the very thing that we want. And that's why it's so critical to understand deeply within ourselves what's happening, so that we can avoid creating what we don't want.
Yeah, and I'm going to add a little bit there, that not only did you sort of push us away, but you literally hurt us. Like sometimes, and it's not because Justin was consciously doing this. He was unconsciously hurting me, and in the way that kids on a step away, but pushing us away unconsciously, because it was partly your attachment style, but also because this is Justin's model of love. And to be able to overcome some of this, and for us to still stay in relationship, and we have to both, but I will say one person at the beginning have to be willing to have a look at it. But before we do that, before we go into some tips to sort of focus, or to see how your childhood patterns might be affecting your adult relationships, what I want to just cover quickly is some of the ways that things that happen in childhood can affect our adult relationships. So just a couple of examples. So a positive example, because this happens on both sides. The negative ones usually cause us the issues in our adult relationships, the positive ones don't, but we're going to show you a positive example. So one, if you have parents, or you're in an environment, a home environment, where you're largely emotionally, your emotions are validated, you're given space to feel all of them, and they're validated. So your parents go, yeah, I see how you're feeling, or they might not actually say those words, but they create space for you to feel your feelings.
Give you a cuddle even, make you feel like, oh, that's okay, I'll see you.
Yeah, so it might be something from even just like last night we had an incident here where my daughter was taking the recycling out and she smashed this huge, this bottle on the ground downstairs. Now, that it's a headache. I collected myself before I went down there, and then I had to sweep up the outdoors too, so there's shards of glass everywhere. Now a parent quite often can just fly off the handle in that situation, which makes her feel very small, silly, and insecure. Instead, and I'm hopefully a whole lot more conscious of that. I took a deep breath and just went, "It's okay, doll. I overloaded that a little bit, and it all happens, and I just sweep it up. We'll just be careful at the moment. There's lots of shards of the glass." So I show her a very caring response, validate that she actually feels a little bit bad, and then let her have the space and just give her a cuddle, reassure, and she's off playing in 3 seconds. So when we grow up in an environment where there's emotional validation, it leads to an adult that feels secure in how they feel. They trust their own feelings, and they're usually better or quite comfortable expressing them to their partner. So that's a positive example. Some of the challenging, some of the negative examples, I guess, or challenging examples, perhaps is a better word, is if you grow up with the opposite, a lot of criticism, a lot of control. It's going to lead to an adult that feels a fear of rejection or a need for validation. So they're constantly looking like, is everything I'm doing okay? Or they don't say those words, but they're seeking validation all the time.
Energetically.
Yes, energetically. So, and it can create a great deal of tension and anxiety. And if that happens to be coupled with an anxious attachment style, which often it would be, then that becomes very off-putting to the partner if they happen to be an avoidant partner. Emotional neglect. So this is something that I experienced where my primary caregivers, they were loving people, and I grew up in an environment where there was a provision of shelter and food and education, but there wasn't any emotional care or attunement, and just simply time. There just wasn't a great deal of time. My parents were very busy raising a very big family. So that emotional neglect, at the end of the day, it is a form of neglect, and for me was a childhood trauma. So that can result in someone who feels difficulty expressing their feelings, forming deep connections, and for me, asking for what I want, asking for what I need. And in fact, I can be
receiving love.
Yeah, absolutely, receiving love, and I can be very disconnected from what I even need. So because my emotions weren't validated and they weren't attuned to, so I numbed them and ignored them and would just go about coping with in other ways. So you can see how different adaptive behaviours become a part of these people's traits. The child comes up with a story and a meaning, and they try to control it in some way or another. So overbearing. One more example is somebody who's a helicopter parent, the overbearing caregiver, where they're taking response. So they're over responsible for the child, so the child never gets to take any risks. The child never gets to feel like, you trust me to make some decisions myself. So this can be, the adult thinks they're being very caring, but in fact it leads to the child feeling disempowered and like they don't believe themselves. They don't believe themselves. It's always got to be somebody else doing it for them. So this, in an adult relationship, can lead to a loss of autonomy and feeling very powered and centered, and codependency tendencies, where they're basically leaning on someone the whole time, which can be quite difficult. They can get easily enmeshed in relationship.
Yeah.
All right. So just as one little pointer here is that you're going to recognise some of these things in yourself or in your partner. Often we'll recognise things in our partner before we recognise them in ourselves, because it's easier. Or you might see a friend and you're like, oh my God, my friend's doing that. Just understand, we just want to put a big ding here, that it's really, these patterns are unconscious for that person. So us pointing them out won't necessarily help. We need to shine the light within ourselves and do the work within ourselves. Pointing things out to your partner or friends just isn't necessarily going to help them. It might in particular situations where you've been able to open up, but just be aware that these patterns are unconscious. It's not someone intending to hurt. It's someone who's using a strategy that they developed in their childhood, and it's playing out in their adult relationships.
We can develop over time, as we become more conscious of this stuff, we can definitely develop effective communication styles to elicit some of this from our partner. Maria and I can talk to each other, and if we see the other one's unconscious, doing something that's not healthy, we can learn to subtly help our partners possibly see what's going on. But again, that's...
The key ingredient there is compassion.
Yeah.
compassion
and
and
not
curiosity.
judging what they're
Compassion.
doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you can come with it with compassion and saying, hey, I notice that are you asking a lot of questions.
It's asking.
Are
It's
you
not.
feeling
It's
like
not
that? Yeah.
assuming. It's asking questions.
All right.
So, all that being said, we all have patterns from our childhood that come into our adult relationships now. How do we break the cycle of the ones that are causing us harm or not going well for us? So, the first step is always awareness. And last week we spoke about triggers, and there's you can go back and watch that video. But there's triggers and things that come up in us, or uncomfortable feelings, emotions. Those patterns, even recognizing patterns that they might not necessarily be triggers, but they're just patterns that keep leading to outcomes that you're not that happy with. Recognizing these without judgment and just looking at the pattern, recognizing the pattern or seeing the trigger, seeing the pattern, seeing there's something within me that I keep doing which leads to this. That's most of the healing work done right there, is just to see it, because again, when it's unconscious, we play it out automatically, we don't see it. The minute we see it, become aware of it with our conscious mind, now we can start to challenge that and change it. The second step, or one of the second stages, is the role of our inner child work, or doing inner child work. Some of you may be familiar with that. If not, it's basically that the child within us, the child that we were as when we're a child, is still within us, is still part of our psyche, it's still part of our emotional body. So we need to understand and learn what inner child work is, and that is basically reparenting ourselves with compassion. So when we notice we're doing something, or we have a need, or we have an outburst, or we have a reaction, like a kid has a tantrum, when we do that as adults, we need to then learn to be the adult that we never got, which is, like Maria said in the example before with, when our daughter smashed the bottle yesterday, is we need to have compassion for ourselves and understanding, and actually go inwards and reparent ourselves and say, I see that you're upset, I see that you're distressed, I see that you're not happy, whatever it is, I see you and it's okay, I'm here for you.
Can I add one little point there that just is a bit of a pro tip, but I'm going to pop it in anyway, and it is a little bit advanced, but one of the key parts of inner child work and reparenting is understanding that your partner can't reparent you. And so often the dynamics we get into in relationship is when we're trying to get our partner, and it's unconscious, but we're trying to get our partner to reparent us, and they cannot do it. As an adult, nobody can do this work except you for yourself. That's it. I can't reparent Justin. I can't heal his wounds. That's not my role. I'm his wife. I'm not his mother. I'm not his father. I'm not his primary caregiver. Justin has to take responsibility and do that work himself. This is a real key, because if you miss this, the inner child work won't really work. You must do it for yourself with compassion, exactly as Justin said. But nobody else can do it. Your children cannot do it. You're dumping the emotional responsibility on them and their children. Your partner cannot do it. And once you can, grasp that deeply, you're going to be on a new path, and you're going to start feeling amazingly, incredibly more powerful, and also you're going to have a relationship with yourself. You're rebuilding that relationship with self. All right.
Good pro tip. So some practical tools that we can do with this is to journal, which is a big one for Maria.
I absolutely love journaling.
I've done it. It's not my go-to. Therapy, I've done tons of that.
Yeah, I have to.
Communication, so working out communication techniques with each other that work, and this can be a process and clunky, but we need to, again, have courage and compassion to start to open up with our partner, that we need to recognise our patterns, reparent our inner child, and then start to communicate this with our partner vulnerably about what we're feeling, what our insecurities are. If there's anything they can do to help in this process without expecting them to help, or without expecting certain things, we can communicate that. But all of that comes with just time and practice and skills we develop along the way.
What is your favourite tool, for you? What's your favourite tool?
My favourite tool is walking in nature. So when I realise I'm distressed, it's almost like I internally pick up my inner child and we go for a walk.
And are you? Is it self-talk as well?
Yeah. So I have a practice where I put one hand on my heart, one hand on my belly, and breathe, and imagine I'm holding the child within, and I'm saying it's okay. A lot of the time, I can say I can handle this, but I see you. It's okay. You struggled as a child. You didn't get love as a child. You didn't get what you needed as a child, and that's nobody's fault. This is not a blame thing. It's just, but I'm here now.
It's really beautiful because Jocelyn's practice is physical. It's an embodied practice. Yeah, and mine's more. My journaling is a way of me. I put the energy into the words that I write, and I'm literally healing. It's a healing process. The energy is coming out of me. It's a release process. So it's really great and there's so many modalities. So find yours, experiment, play like a child does.
Yeah.
And,
The main thing is that we see and spend time with that part inside that's feeling wounded. And the next step, or one of the next ways to break the cycle, is to encourage self-responsibility. So our patterns are not our fault. I didn't choose to be in a divorced family. I didn't choose what my mother did. I didn't choose what my father did. I didn't choose any of that. It's not my fault that I was even unconscious as a child, and we don't know what we're doing as a child. However, it is my responsibility to see this within myself. There's no one in this body with me but me. There's my patterns, my stories, my emotions. They're mine. If I feel them, see them, experience them, they're mine. There's only me that can take responsibility for that. And that's tricky to get your head around sometimes, because it feels like our partner is the one doing whatever to us, but that's not true at all. It's within us. So we need to encourage ourselves to be self-responsible.
Yeah, that's another pro tip, by the way.
Yeah.
All right. So,
and all of that being said, this is a process and a journey, and takes practice and skill. So, which we can learn. We need to learn it.
In many ways, it becomes a new way of living.
Mm-hmm.
So, and on that note, it really is a path forward. It's the path and the journey you're going to take throughout the rest of your life. And as these things come up, they come up for healing. But basically, healing is possible, and it does. Once we're doing this work and we're starting to recognise our childhood patterns, starting to self-soothe, we're taking responsibility for what's going on, we're investigating it, healing it, updating mental models, all of that sort of work, inner child work. Once we're doing that, it will transform your relationship and all of your relationships, and it's going to transform how you be in the world, because energetically we're now we're more of a whole empowered person ultimately. We're certainly on that path to becoming freer of the things and the limitations that are holding us back, which are always untruths. They're always things that happened, and they were in our childhood experience, that served a purpose for a period of time, that did really, really well. But as we're an adult now, we're the ones that can update that. We can change our beliefs. We can change the limiting patterns or the behaviours that we don't like. And it is a process, because we have to rewire our nervous system, we have to rewire the response in our body, but it's a path, and it's a path forward. And this is exactly what Jocelyn and I did, and it has transformed our relationship. And it still surprises me to this day how quickly we can move through something that in the past would have tripped us up for weeks or possibly months. And I'm not kidding. Just yesterday we had an incident, and honestly, in the past, that would have possibly tripped us up for months. And yesterday, there was still the response, and there was still the reaction.
The wound still gets triggered.
And it came up, and then we were able to speak about it. We had a little break, and when we came back together, we both spoke about it, and it was just dissolved within a moment.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking at Jocelyn because we haven't even talked about that yet. But I was actually, later in the afternoon, I was like, oh. I just am blown away by that can happen, and that I feel
safe enough to do.
Yeah, and also just that it doesn't derail us anymore. So there is a path forward, and there is a way to transform your relationship and to feel a whole lot better. So if any of this has given you a little spark, or if any of it's been something you want to delve into deeper, this is a very, very, very large topic, and we go really deep into this in our workshop, which we have
So we've got, I'll put a link in the description, but we've got online and in-person
Yeah,
workshops
workshops
coming
coming
up. So we'll put the details there.
These are our 3-hour road to relationship workshops. We highly recommend it. We get amazing feedback from all our attendees. It just gives you, we delve a bit deeper into all of this, and we give you a whole lot more pointers into how we want to move forward on our path and how to transform ourselves to transform our relationships. So we'd love you to come. If you're not in our Facebook group, jump on in to our private Facebook group, and I guess the only other way is to just reach out. Personal message, either Justin or myself, or just on within the group, and ask a question. You can even ask the question into the group and give us feedback. Let us know what's going on in your life, because I guarantee that if there's something happening in your life, it's going to be happening to somebody else within our group. So feel free to contribute and ask questions, and we'll be here to answer them.
Yeah, beautiful. Relationships can be resuscitated and they can be thriving. So we're trying to spread this message of hope, because we know the pain of being in a relationship that's not going well, and we know what it's like to be in a relationship that feels safe and secure, and where you can explore yourself and finally be free of the stuff that's holding you back, which is the greatest gift, to be free. You want to be free of your own limitations. So that was a big video. We'll leave it there, and yeah, we'll talk to you guys soon.